The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
Expect the unexpected. You're taking off on a flight you'll remember as long as you live.
Approach, Legion 2601.
Legion 2601, boss, go ahead.
Hey, we have to declare an emergency. We have 160 souls on board, 4,500 pounds of fuel. We have a right main landing gear indication that it is not down and locked.
Legion 2601, roger. And do you want to return to the airport this time?
That's affirmative.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 94 of the Squawk Ident Podcast, recorded on Tuesday, November 9th, 2021, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, we will explore the FAA's intention to have CFIs stop using PTS, or Practical Test Standards, as an evaluation tool and replace it with ACS, or Airman Certification Standards. We also discussed 19-year-old Zara Rutherford and her world record attempt to become the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. And yes, he's back. JETPACK MAN. We have an update on the Southern California sightings. American Airlines also recently announced that it has increased flight attendant holiday pay by 300% after a recent operational meltdown. We will have our analysis on what we can expect this holiday season. And in a pandemic milestone, U.S. ends international travel ban, opening the door to vaccinated tourists. This is a huge step forward for aviation here in the U.S. All this and more on board Flight 94 of the Squawk Ident Podcast. Let me just take this opportunity to again thank Jonathan Gruber and Colonel Terry Schooler for joining us on Flight 93, Moderate or Greater. Rob, Captain Roger, and I enjoyed hearing about John's progress with his Lancer build, and speaking again with Colonel Schooler, it was fantastic. Thanks again, gentlemen. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 94 of the Squawk Ident Podcast is officially underway. Assisting at the controls on today's flight is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his mobile podcast studio high atop the 5th floor of the Hyatt Place Hotel in Fort Myers, Florida, where he is recovering from an unforgiving flight schedule. Fresh from a nearly perfect landing after an RNAV visual on runway 6 at Southwest Florida International Airport, or KRSW. Help us in welcoming our very own Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, Tony, I'm doing good, man. Hey, I got to correct you on that. It was 2 perfect landings on the same try, because when I landed, we bounced a little. Came up, came back down. So, yeah, it was nice and soft, but it was just great. Yeah. It's good to be back, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and good to hear from you. Good to see you. And, yeah, do you get to count those as 2?
I would think so. It's a touch and go, isn't it? I guess it's an attempted landing, so that's all that counts. So
there you go. Way to keep current, my brother.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So what have you been up to?
Crazy.
You've been flying quite heavy schedule from what I hear.
I have. I just been flying these 3-day trips, which is what I was awarded for our monthly bidding schedule. And it's been kind of the first or second month. I guess it's the second month that I've been doing this, mainly because I wasn't able to hold them before. I always got 4-day trips. Every now and then you get that red eye with the 5th day in it, but So it's been kind of nice to get 3-day trips because you get a lot, they're pretty efficient. You get a lot done in 3 days. And then, of course, just to try to line up some days off, you end up backing trips back to back. So that's kind of what I did. And so I'm at the end of like the second week or third week of 3 days, 1 day off, 3 days, 1 day off, 3 days, 1 day off. So tomorrow can't come soon enough because after tomorrow I'll have about, almost a week and a half off. So,
yeah,
I'm kind of trying to set myself up for, I wouldn't call it the inevitable meltdown of the holiday travel thing, but I'm trying to set myself up so I have some time in my schedule that I can maybe pick up some premium flying. So,
yeah, it's funny because I think I'm got it planned kind of in the same strategy. I've had 2 weeks of vacation, and unlike how it was over at Sandpiper for us, when you're on vacation, you can't pick up. You can't double dip.
Right.
So here at Mainline, when you're on vacation, you're off the schedule. You're not allowed to pick up. You can't. So I've had 2 weeks of vacation. This just happens to be what my seniority could hold in terms of vacation the first 2 weeks of November. And, I've gotten a lot done around the house. My schedule's been crazy, filled with all the projects that I've been putting off for months, if not years. A lot of painting and a lot of construction going on. But it's nice to have that time off. I feel your pain with the three on and 1 off. You really never kind of catch up because it takes about a day to kind of recover and get back into the home life schedule, and then you're turning around and packing a bag and going right back at it. So
exactly. What I normally get done in 3 days, I've had to compress into 1 day, and even then had to just pick the super important stuff that family time and laundry. So here we are, and then of course volleyball never stops. So fitting that in, to, the 1 day a week. So it's like, geez.
Yeah.
So come to work to get a break. That's basically what it is.
That's it. Well, welcome back. I'm on vacation until Sunday, and I'll be doing the same thing. I'm going to put myself on that premium list because I'm sure that there will be plenty of open trips this holiday season. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here later on in the show. But also joining us today is an exceptional aviator. He is a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, a Falcon 900 and 2000 commander, a captain and corporate operator as well. He joins us fresh off another weekend trip. This last time was from the shores of West Palm Beach, Florida. Man, talk about living the high life. From his studio, from somewhere in San Diego, California, please help me in welcoming to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Well, as you heard, a little bit of vacation time on my end. I've been spoiled to be here at home and not doing much work. How about yourself? You've been flying only on the weekends or what?
Yeah, it's been a lot of, I think for the last 4 week weekends straight, I've been flying over them. 3 days or 4 day trips, and actually have another weekend trip coming up this week, and having like a couple 2 to 3, and this week 4 days off in the middle. But yeah, it's been, for whatever reason, because it's not usually like this, just weekend trips. And kind of like you guys, I work really hard. I flew 1 leg out to West Palm Beach, and I sit there for 2 or 3 days, and then I fly 1 leg back, and it's exhausting. Let me tell you, it was exhausting.
Yeah, and the weather in West Palm Beach this time of year, I heard, is terrible.
Well, actually, it did. It was not that great while we were out there the first day, because we got there, flying West Coast to East Coast. You're losing 3 hours. So we got there actually mid-afternoon, and that first day was okay. And then that night it rolled in, and for the next 24 hours straight, it rained. It was like something out here in California. It kind of blew my mind. It poured frequently, but it then did not stop for 24 hours. And then the next day was windy. And then we came home the next day. So it actually wasn't the greatest weather while we were out there. So I will say that it wasn't completely paradise on earth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. make me feel bad about
Yeah.
saying how spoiled you are. Yeah, right now. Well, today's a good show. I mean, we've had some really nice shows here recently. We've had some opportunities to interview some fantastic aviators, and I want to thank you, gentlemen, again for joining me on those. Kyle again is got a crazy schedule. Unfortunately, couldn't make it today on today's show, but we look forward to having him join in on a future episode. Now, first thing I wanted to get into, let's talk about this FAA decision. Now, I read this article and I thought this is interesting. I had not really heard this before, but I really am not that connected to general aviation flight training. It's been over a decade or more than a decade and a half, actually, since I was flight training and a CFI myself. So I found it interesting. Now, I read this article from Flying Magazine. It's an article written by Meg Glowiski. It was published on November 2nd, and we'll put a link in the show notes. It's entitled, FAA Moves Ahead with Airman Certification Standards for CFIs. Now, the article went on to say that teaching people to fly should incorporate risk management. Yet currently, the test standards for CFIs do not contain a mechanism for evaluating the applicant's judgment towards risk. This will change with the release of the Airman Certification Standards for CFIs, a document currently in development. And it's important to note that the date for the release has not been set yet. However, last month, the FAA held a meeting with the ACS working group made up of stakeholders in the aviation training industry. The big difference between ACS and the PTS, that the ACS contains tools to evaluate the applicant's judgment. And that's what David St. George, Executive Director of the Society of Aviation and Flight Educators, aka SAFE, another acronym for you. They, along with the National Association of Flight Instructors, or the NAFI, are carefully watching the development of the ACS for instructors. David St. George, a designated pilot examiner, or DPE, has seen his share of pilots who had the skills and knowledge required to fly an airplane, but perhaps did not understand the risks involved and therefore had questionable judgment. He stated that they had the skills, they had the knowledge, but it was very apparent that the applicant had no judgment when it came to evaluating risks. The ACS gave the examiners the ability to evaluate the applicant's judgment. This is kind of I'd say a step forward, not unlike what we saw at the airline level with AQP coming in with scenario-based training and scenario-based simulator programs. Now, the article goes on, and I'll just read one more portion. That the FAA's FAQs on the change from PTS to ACS notes the latter, enhancing safety by using the risk management section in each ACS area of operation to translate special emphasis items and abstract terms like aeronautical decision-making into specific behaviors relevant to each task. The change from PTS to ACS actually began back in 2011 as the FAA revamped the knowledge test for many pilot certificate levels, removing outdated and irrelevant questions. This process evolved to address the practical test, and in 2016, the ACS for the private pilot airplane certification was released. Among the changes was the definition of slow flight, as well as the way slow flight was performed. No more requirement to have the stall warning horn actuated during the entire maneuver. The ACS also saw the addition of scenario-based training, the idea being to create a situation where the pilot has to make a series of decisions to affect a positive outcome of the flight. Again, the link will be in the show notes if you want to read the rest of the article, but like I mentioned, it sounds like AQP development is now reaching into Part 61 and Part 141 flight training. So, Roger, as an active CFI, II and MEI flight instructor, what you said you've seen this. It's not the first time you've heard about this. What can you tell us about it?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, to say I'm an active CFI might be a little bit on the generous side. But I obviously I did have my foot in the training industry for a while. And then also, I think that this is a little bit different and outside of what you guys have been used to, because you guys have been doing the AQP thing for so long. And actually, this is not actually new. I've been actually training for under AQP for each of the last, four type ratings that I've done. So there was no PTS for the ATP check ride. It's gone to the ACS. I think the private was the first one that did it, kind of, as you're reading the article, because they were introducing this scenario-based training. And I do think that it is a good thing. And what this is now it looks like that the practical test for a flight instructor is now going to be done under the ACS instead of the PTS. And the big thing I think with that is because if you kind of look at it or think about it, you've got a private pilot that's going and that they're training under the ACS, of which you had said that there's this simulation judgment based approach to it. Except now we're kind of having a flight instructor teach to the ACS and the simulation based, except they weren't being examined on it themselves, because the check ride that they have been taking up till now and until this actually goes into effect, they've been training under the PTS. And so they were instructing something that they haven't actually been tested on. And so I think that this is probably a good thing. For many reasons. The ACS, I think, is a step over the PTS. The whole stall recovery and the new way that everybody recovers from stalls now came from the ACS. And a lot of this came from that Colgan crash up in Buffalo back in 2009, as I recall, where we just kind of looked at a different way to train pilots. And it's, I've always said that, if you really get down to it, you can teach almost anybody how to manipulate the controls of an airplane. Landing is something that everybody thinks about, but in the end, landing is just something that if you do it enough, you can get to the point where anybody can take off, fly, and land an aircraft. But really what separates pilots and why we have to have the training that we have is when things don't go the way that they're supposed to. And that's where that whole judgment comes into play. It's like every accident that anyone ever talks about, we talk about the chain. And if you break that chain in every point, well, that's a scenario, that's a situation, that's something that, at what point are you able to say, look, this is from a risk-based standpoint, this is not where we want to be. And we need to change something. And that's why we stress now, if you're doing a circle to land approach, which is what typically we do in the Part 91 type rides, if you're doing a circling approach and it looks ugly, go around, try it again. That's that scenario-based, risk-based thing. We don't want you just trying to put it down, trying to impress the examiner to pass to check the box for our circle to land approach. We want you to make a decision, a risk-based decision that says, hey, this is not looking good. This isn't stable. Let's just come around and try it again. And that's looked upon much, much more favorably now than it was 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah. And Rob, it's been a while, but, do you ever remember this change from the PTS or has it always been PTS for you?
No, actually, I don't. This is the first I've heard of it. It's always been PTS to me, but, I'm kind of like you, have been far removed from the general aviation world and, all the changes that have been going on. But, just hearing this and, kind of agreeing with most of the things that the FAA does, anytime they make changes, it's, for the better and it's always safer. And I do like that they're incorporating, the evaluation and training as far as judgment and risk management, because when all of us were training, getting our private instrument commercial, there was always a little bit of judgment that you had to demonstrate to your CFI in making decisions, but that was never something that was evaluated, and it was never actually taught. It was just kind of it was kind of more of a hey, this is how I would do it, or this is the way that it has always been done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It may have never been correct or something like that. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they actually evaluate and teach judgment, per the new, what do they call it, ACS standards. So, that and many other things looks like a great advancement in training. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I can remember having issues with one student in particular all those years ago. And of course, when you're a new flight instructor and you come to a new job, you have the other flight instructors usually throw you a bone and give you a student or two that they've been working with. Yeah. And depending on their workload, they'll be like, yeah, here, have this student, you're going to be taken over. And of course, it's always the students they didn't want to deal with or were having trouble with. Yeah. And of course, my first student, I had 2 or 3 thrown at me, and my first student was an issue. And the issue was a very intelligent student, middle-aged woman who really wanted to get her private and instrument ratings, was working for a big aeronautical company in the Phoenix area. And she was like, I read the jet book cover to cover, and this is, I don't really need to be here. I just need to put in my time so you can sign me off. And I just need you to sign me off so I can go take the test. I'm like, well, why don't you let me,
I love those,
evaluate and let's see if
those are money makers.
Well,
that's a CFI.
Yeah, sometimes yes. Sometimes they're more of a headache than anything else. But so I said, well, let's go up, and we went up a few times, and she was insistent that she was ready to take the test. But I saw some areas that were going to give her trouble. Back then, what we did was we would say, okay, you're going to do an evaluation because you have to go up with either a senior flight instructor or the assistant chief or the chief pilot and go up, and you will get a stage check, is what they called them. And then from there, you got, a different set of eyes on the student, and then they can come up together with a plan on how we can get this student to pass the test. And there was really no avenue for this assessment of risk that there is now. So, man, my hat's off to the FAA for adopting this program. It really seems like now there's an avenue that is defined and set that will give CFIs a better tool to help in this evaluation of risk assessment in a candidate.
That's the other kind of big thing that it goes before that PTS. The PTS was something that we looked at pretty much right before the check ride and said, okay, this is the document that tells you whether you are going to pass or whether you're going to fail this check ride. But you didn't really look at that until the very end of training, whereas now the big push is in integrating that ACS from the beginning of flight training, because it's much more of a living document, if you will. Not that it changes, but something that they want you to be involved with from almost, day 2 and onward in your flight training, because hey, it's not just this is what a stall recovery to pass a check ride looks like. It's what is a stall, how does a stall develop, and then the recovery from that, from a much more of an understanding and a risk-based standpoint than it is just, okay, well, a stall you're going to recover within 100 feet of your starting altitude, along with all these other criteria, and we've moved away from that. So it's something that they want the instructors to incorporate from the very beginning of flight training now, instead of just this is the pass or fail master document on whether you're going to pass or fail.
Yeah, it's one thing to perform a maneuver within so many knots and so many degrees and all this stuff. And it's another thing to put somebody in a kind of an ambiguous situation to where they have to first recognize what's happening in order to then work through the procedures for recovery for that maneuver.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to highlight, which was pretty cool to see, I saw this a few weeks ago, and then I read a recent article, and I've been following this young lady on Instagram, following the progress. And this pilot, this 19-year-old pilot, is making a world record attempt to fly around the world. And she's going to turn some heads if she is successful. From an article from Flying Magazine by Michael Wild, dated November 2nd, entitled Pilot Attempting Around the World Flight Hits the Halfway Point. 19-year-old Zara Rutherford is aiming to become the youngest woman to fly the trip solo around the world. The article goes on to say, after being grounded in the gold-rushed city of Nome, Alaska for nearly a month, Zara, the 19-year-old Belgian, who is on a quest to become the youngest woman to fly solo around the world, has made it to Russia, reaching the halfway point of her trip. In a short video posted on social media on Monday, Rutherford's frosty breath illustrated the biting 24 below zero temperature that greeted her in the city of Anadar. I don't know. After her safe passage across the Bering Strait.
Huh.
The composite-built Shark Arrow microlight that Rutherford is flying is a high-performance two-seat tandem ultralight aircraft with retractable gear and a two-bladed variable pitch propeller. It is powered by a Rotax 912 ULS 100 horsepower engine, which allows it to achieve cruise speeds of up to 140 knots, one of the fastest in its category.
Rutherford has now crossed the international date line. According to her website, she'll require 30 more stops to complete her trip. Early Tuesday, Rutherford made it to Russia. Sorry. Yeah, Magadan. Right. After a 6-hour, 25-minute flight over the Siberian Arctic tundra from Anadyr. From Russia, Zara will fly to Korea, Indonesia, India, the Middle East, Europe, and back to Belgium, where she plans to arrive in December. You know, this sounds a lot like one of Roger's trips.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It really does.
Maybe without so many stops.
Holy mackerel. Zara is 77 days into a trip that was originally planned to last 45. Compounding weather delays caused Rutherford's initial Russian visa to expire, grounding her in Nome. The current record holder, Shaista Wise, completed her own trip in 2017 at age 30, taking 145 days to do so, owing in part to her planned outreach events via her nonprofit, Dream Soar, but also as a result of various weather and mechanical delays. Earlier this year, 18-year-old Travis Ludlow from United Kingdom earned the record of youngest man and person to fly solo around the world, which he was able to do in 44 days. Should Rutherford complete her trip, she would reduce the male-female gap from 11 years to 11 months. Wow, that's pretty good.
Yep.
Additionally, she will be the first woman to circumnavigate the globe in a microlight and the first person from Belgium to do so in a single-engine aircraft. Rutherford had more than 130 solo hours logged prior to the departure on the flight. Yep, that's what Roger said. That's amazing.
I mean, can you imagine? You have 120 hours or 130 hours.
Let me just
of solo.
stop you right there. No, I cannot imagine.
I can't imagine.
No,
I know.
I was scared at 100. What is that? 130 solo hours. Okay, yeah. Maybe I could fly within the state of California.
Right.
And I was scared to go outside of that.
Because you're familiar with the airspace and the terrain and everything like that.
And I use the word familiar somewhat lightly at that point.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah. And she's doing ocean international. My visa expired because my plane broke in minus 25 degree temperatures. No, I cannot imagine. I stopped there. And I'm impressed. I'm beyond impressed.
Very impressed. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
I'm flying Zara on her Instagram page. You can also follow along either from her website or you can follow her on Instagram at FlyZolo, ZOLO, FlyZolo, one word, on Instagram. I'll put a link in the show notes for the Flying Magazine story that we just reviewed. And I'll be keeping an eye on this because this is for 19 years old, amazing. And we're all rooting for you here at the Squawk Ident Podcast.
Definitely. Good luck to you.
And
fly safely.
And be safe. Yes.
Yeah.
And stay warm. Stay warm. Don't forget that part.
Absolutely. 19 years old. I don't know what the rules are in Russia, but vodka will warm you up.
It's a lot easier if you just go to the North Pole, maybe go south of the North Pole about 10 miles and just, do once around the North Pole at 10 miles, and you can say you've been around the world, and you'd probably break the world record. Anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
I think you figured it out, Rob. Well, we're all excited to see her progress. And you know what else gets me excited, gentlemen? The JETPACK MAN.
I thought you were going to say vodka.
No, vodka and I are not friends. JETPACK MAN. Can you believe that he's back? Well, not really. Turns out, could it be a balloon? Well, here we have a NBC4 I-Team exclusive.
Now at 5, JETPACK mystery solved. After months of investigation, the I-Team has uncovered new images that may have cracked this case. Good evening, I'm Chuck Henry.
And I'm Colleen Williams. 3 pilots have reported seeing something flying near their planes in the past year, and investigators have been struggling to find a clear explanation. Now look at this. There is a startling new image that may be steering the investigation toward an unlikely explanation. That's what you're seeing on your screen right now. Our investigative reporter, Eric Leonard, has been reporting on this story for months. He joins us live right now with what he has found out. Eric.
Hi, Colleen. We've spent the better part of a year looking into all kinds of leads and tips about this alleged JETPACK man that was first reported near LAX over a year ago. And we've been hearing rumors about the existence of this photo you're seeing, but it wasn't until the last few months that we learned the picture had been taken by the LAPD. And it's now a central clue in the mystery being investigated by the FBI and FAA.
This photo, captured by LAPD officers from a police helicopter, shows a human-shaped figure appearing to float thousands of feet in the air over the Holmby Hills and Hollywood Hills. On closer examination, it appears to be a life-sized inflatable toy, possibly a Jack Skellington character from the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas. The reason this photo is so significant is that after it was given to federal investigators, they began to look at the possibility that a human-shaped inflatable is what the jetliner pilots had been seeing. And that fits with some other findings, that it was all but impossible for someone to have flown a homemade actual jetpack into the LAX approach path, then vanish without anyone seeing it land or crash. That whatever the objects were never appeared on radar, and that no one other than the reporting pilots ever saw the objects. The FBI and FAA have confirmed this kind of human-shaped inflatable is one of the possible explanations for the sightings. The agencies told me today one working theory is that pilots might have seen balloons.
Well, there you have
Interesting.
I saw that last week, and I couldn't help but thinking of all of us as I laughed to myself. It was like, after all that, it's balloons.
It's a freaking
balloon. That's probably why it didn't show up on radar.
Yeah, and the photos that they were talking about, and thanks again for the NBC for I-Team here in Los Angeles for producing this story. Because we've been curious. We've been keeping an eye on out, and it's kind of a running joke when you're on approach in LAX. I'm like, keep an eye out for JETPACK MAN, But yeah, even the BBC carried the story. I'll put a link in the show notes for the BBC article, which mirrors the same thing. That it's probably a balloon that, Jack Skellington kind of thing going on, a character from a film. But yeah, it's now that the information about the radar return never produced anything. How can somebody disappear? No one saw a person landing, it makes sense. Now, the one thing I did disagree with, especially in the BBC article at the end of it, it says that, a balloon generally will be harmless to airplanes. If it had metal parts on it, maybe it could destroy an engine, but generally a balloon is harmless. Well, that's not true, especially if it's a Mylar balloon, because if that gets ingested into an engine, even a balloon that's not Mylar, that gets caught between the fan blades, that can cause an overheating, that could catch fire, that could be ingested, and then that could absolutely destroy a jet engine.
Sensor or probe and throw a computer off, and next thing you know, your plane thinks it's stalling, but it's really not.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, definitely kind of disappointing. I think I was hoping to
get it'd
something
been kind of
better.
neat to catch somebody like Elon Musk. Yeah, I've been testing this thing out here, just wondering how well it works.
I was on a drunken sprawl. I was pissed at Joe Biden, so I got on a jetpack.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, let's go Biden shirt on the guy. Yeah, I thought the jetpack balloon looked like an alien. Just like the shape of the body and the stereotypical silhouette of an alien. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I want to know where can I buy one of these things?
Exactly. I'm like, dude, those things got to be literally, no pun intended, flying off the shelves. So.
That's true. That's absolutely true. At this point,
anyway.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more.
All right.
From Flight 94.
Don't go anywhere.
Stay tuned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back. Well, we've been talking about all kinds of things, from solo flights around the world to JETPACK MAN, and now, recently, the American Airlines company has announced something pretty crazy. Now, we've been talking about premium pay and red flag trips and super critical coverage here in the past with some of our guests over at sister companies and, Sandpiper with their super premium 300% pay for pilots that pick up critical coverage, super critical coverage trips. And of course, when you see a trip like that and go, wait a minute, I can get paid 300% to just go fly my regular trip. Of course, right? So there are those of us that say, no, you should kind of curb that and only pick up what you absolutely should, fly and don't go overboard, because there are pilots out there that may, they need a job. So, make the company hire more pilots instead of throwing Band-Aids out there and offering pilots more money to go pick up these trips. And of course, they're trying. The company was proposed over at Legacy to hire, 2,000 pilots here on 2022, which is a good chunk of change. And that takes time. So what do we do in the interim? Well, I know what they're doing over there at American. In an article by CNN Business by Ramesh Maroof, the American Airlines increased flight attendant holiday pay after an operational meltdown. We all kind of heard about what happened during Halloween over there at American Airlines. They had to cancel many flights, hundreds. And in this article, they explain how American has decided to combat that. American Airlines is giving flight attendants who work during the holidays a one-time holiday pay premium, the company announced in an internal memo. The increased holiday pay comes after an operational meltdown during Halloween weekend, which forced the airline to cancel not hundreds, but thousands of flights, partly due to staffing shortage. Oh, I guess it wasn't weather after all. Go figure.
Yeah.
Flight attendants who work between November 23rd and November 29th and December 22nd to January 2nd will receive a 150% premium, according to an internal memo viewed by CNN. Those with no absences between November 15th to January 2nd will receive an even higher premium of 300% for the hours they work during the peak holiday period. On the schedule front, we've ensured that November and December are built to meet customer demand and that they are fully supportable by our staff, Chief Operating Officer David Seymour said in an internal staff note viewed by CNN. American anticipates that 4,000 new team members will be joining the company in the fourth quarter, and that the airline will have 600 new flight attendant hires by the end of December. Nearly 1,800 flight attendants have returned from leaves in November, and 800 more will return in December, the staff note said. American said that the company has 24,000 flight attendants right now. American furloughed 8,000 flight attendants during the pandemic when it anticipated federal aid for airline workers expiring. From pandemic-related changes to the way we must do business, including mask and other travel requirements, to a small minority of customers who caused disturbances, the last 20 months have been incredibly challenging for many personally and professionally, Seymour said. American blamed last week's operational meltdown on bad weather in Dallas-Fort Worth and a shortage of pilots and flight attendants. Airline unions say staff are at a breaking point. And Rob, over there at Legacy Airlines, where we are, we follow a lot of the similar stresses. So
yes,
this is an interesting article. It goes on to say more about the unions and some happy-go-lucky comments from their internal management staff over there at that company there at American. So what do you think? Do you think that offering this super critical 150% pay, but as long as you don't call in sick or have a problem in that period, that you will actually get rewarded with 300% pay? I mean, that's a pretty hefty thing.
Yeah. I mean, I see it as a two-way street. This is first of all just a Band-Aid for, the bigger problem, which like we kind of mentioned or like it alluded into in the article, which is staffing. They need more people to work the flights. The schedule that they have built, they're not capable of sustaining that. When things go wrong, like it did over Halloween. Halloween, we had that weather event in Dallas where the winds just were crazy. You can listen to our other, I forget what podcast we did. I think it was 93 that we talked about the winds, which caused all kinds of cancellations and delays. So initially the weather was the cause, but it ultimately became a staffing issue because the airline wasn't able to repair its schedule because they couldn't get the people to the airplanes or vice versa, the airplanes to the people, which is basically a staffing thing. And, from a passenger standpoint, it doesn't matter, and what matters is, that they need to get from point A to point B and that, while they're inconvenienced, that they're properly accommodated. Well, if the airline blames it on weather, then they're not liable to offer any kind of accommodations to their passengers because it's a Mother Nature event. Well, when you read the article, they say, hey, it's staffing. So it's actually the airline's fault. And in that case, if a flight was canceled due to staffing or mechanical problems, then that's when they have to offer the passengers, accommodations. Yeah, but this is an industry-wide thing. Yeah. So Southwest does it, Delta does it. They'll blame it on weather, and then they won't offer anything. So anyway, I digress. It's I think it's just a Band-Aid for the real issue, which is they need to run a better schedule. They need to be able to repair it quicker and better, and they need to have more people available. 300% is great. Capitalize when you can. I believe they need to negotiate a better scheduling and pay, especially around holidays.
Yeah.
When more people are traveling, because right now it's kind of hard to believe we don't get anything extra to fly on holidays. Whereas if you look at almost every other industry, you're making time and a half or whatever. So
yeah. And in my previous career as a retail manager for a multi-billion-dollar international company that I don't know if we've talked about that in the past, but I worked for a big box retailer, and the employee contract had 5 days where the company was closed on those 5 national holidays. And on those days, you'd stay at home and you got a full day's pay. Whether you're full-time, part-time, it was all calculated. And the way they did it was, I thought, one of the smartest things that I've ever heard of. And what they did is, okay, you're going to get paid on that holiday. And if you call in sick the day before or your last day before the holiday, or you call in sick the first day returning from the holiday. So even if you had the holiday and then the next day off, and then on the third day you're supposed to work a shift, if you called in sick on that shift, the first day back, then you would forfeit the holiday pay. Also, they offered anyone that was picking up a shift during the holiday the time and a half pay. So there were, of course, certain holidays like Christmas and New Year's, we were like, okay, everybody stay home. But if you needed to restock your shelves, especially the day after Christmas or the day, after Christmas Eve, the store was just tore up and they needed everybody to help come in, clean up, fold clothes, put away merchandise, and get the company or the retailer back to an acceptable level of cleanliness and organization for the next day's business. So they'd ask a skeleton crew to come in and they'd pay them premium pay. And I always thought that at an airline, when, people, the most important time of the year is when those few moments where you're going on a holiday to go see Nana, right? So, like you said, the passengers don't care if there's weather. They don't care if there's a shortage or you're dealing with pandemic issues. They just want to go see Nana, and they paid for their ticket that left. They're supposed to leave at 5:00 from their home airport and get to Nana's house by 7. Then, damn it, that's what they want. They don't really care about the excuses. So I always thought that, if you were on reserve, you're always going to work the holiday because there's going to be a good number of staff that's going to call in sick or find some way to get out of flying or drop a trip or whatever. And so everyone was going to be working, and they were inevitably going to run out of pilots, flight attendants, rampers, gate agents, whatever it is in the industry. They were going to run out because, that's just a nature of the beast. And I always thought, well, why not just tell anybody that says, hey, if you're flying during this time period, like they've just announced, if they made that a permanent thing where anyone flying on that week gets 150% pay just in the contract, that's it. And if you call in sick, you forfeit that from your guarantee. I don't think they'd have as many people calling in sick because, again, it's an opportunity to make a little cash. And I think that would improve the dynamics of the operation and then minimize the opportunity for lost revenue and lost flying and misconnects and all that stuff. Yeah. So it is a Band-Aid. But hopefully they'll see enough success with it that maybe in a future contract, that'll just be built in that if you fly during those 2 or 3 weeks during the year, you're going to get a little extra premium. I think it would actually save the company more money than it would lose. Yeah. Because when you call in sick, you're still getting paid from your sick bank, right? And now you got to, the other pilot's getting paid too. That's recovering from your sick call. So you're double paying somebody. To offer 150% pay to just fly the trip, you're saving money in that case. So, it's definitely something that we're watching closely this year because we are trying to recover. Companies are trying to hire the subcontractors, as we've mentioned in previous episodes. All the third-party contractors, below-wing services, above-wing services, fuelers, de-icers, these people are all contracted out. Those companies are also trying to hire, but with anything, it takes time to train, get certified, and have everybody up to speed.
Pass all the DOT and security checks and all that stuff. Yep.
Did I think I saw something I think it was American. Was there some kind of plan or something I saw that they were going to try and hire 400 pilots in the span of a month or something too?
Oh, I didn't see that.
I saw that too. I saw it somewhere. I didn't receive anything. Actually, maybe I did, but internal company memo. I think it was mentioned in a internal podcast from one of our higher ups. But yeah, I don't. There's no way that they could do that.
I thought
400 by the end of the year.
It was just a headline that I saw at some point, and I thought that it said something about American, and maybe it wasn't American. Maybe it was United. I don't remember. That somebody wanted American. To hire some obscene amount of pilots in the span of a really shorter amount of time. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe I was dreaming.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
I think they are too, if that's what they did.
Then again, I've been on vacation, so the last thing I'm going
to look into that and find out. Like, I didn't actually click on it. It was just something that I saw scrolling through some headlines at one point. But I'll do some research on that.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it'd be worth it.
If you don't hear anything back from that, it was my mistake.
Yeah, no, I heard it though. I've heard it also. So it's I'm curious because, what, I just always find it hard to believe that all of a sudden we're going to find 400 pilots and go, hey, let's come to American. You know what I mean? It's just,
yeah. And a Legacy, I hear, is trying to do the same thing.
I do. Actually, I've heard that too.
I've heard Legacy is trying to do something similar to that. I don't know about 400, but they're looking under rocks and looking under airplane wings and trying to find pilots.
All the help
but we
can
screw
get.
you around like little cockroaches every time.
Yeah. Right on, man.
Well, Rob, you're on your layover right now. And you're going to have an opportunity, from what we talked about earlier, to go out and hang out with your crew and get dinner. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So this has been a crazy 3-day, and I don't know if you've had this on any of your sequences. So we started with this crew yesterday, which is day 1 of a 3-day. Now, normally, everybody's on a weird schedule. So you maybe fly with them in maybe 1 or 2 flights, and then everybody goes on their own way, or we end up at the same overnight and everybody goes to a different hotel. And this is a weird one. So we started with them yesterday, did a Puerto Vallarta turn, came back to Dallas, then Dallas to New Orleans, spent the night in New Orleans, same hotel, then flew New Orleans to Dallas this morning. However, the cabin crew did New Orleans to Charlotte, and they are meeting here in Fort Myers right now. I mean, they landed like an hour ago.
Oh.
So we all talked about it yesterday. Let's all meet at 5:00 and we're going to go out to dinner because we didn't really have a chance yesterday. And tomorrow we're going to fly together, Fort Myers to Charlotte, then Charlotte back to Dallas. So we're going to finish the trip together. And we only really did 1 or 2 flights differently. So,
yeah. What do you think this is? Sandpiper?
Right. I know. It's crazy. So yeah, we're going to get going and going to meet them for dinner. So there were a bunch of 4 really, really good flight attendants. So they've taken care of the passengers really well and doing an outstanding job as our representatives in the cabin.
Good. No physical altercations on any of your trips this past week?
No, none at all. Everybody's been very happy and fun, and pretty much had an online on-time operation this week. So It's been good.
Nice.
Yeah, man.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to have you to leaving us a little early, but go have fun.
Yeah.
By all means, and give my regards to your crew. That's fantastic.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and look forward to the next one. And you guys fly safe. I know you're not going to fly for how much longer, Tony? You're on vacation?
Well, I'm on vacation till Sunday, so another 5 days.
Okay.
But I will put myself on that premium list Monday morning, and I'm sure something will come up.
Well, there you go. So enjoy the rest of your vacation. Enjoy the R&R and time you have with the family.
Roger shakes his head.
Roger was shaking his head.
I need to, Roger.
All right, take care.
Enjoy your time and fly safely, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks. All right, have a good one.
See you, Rob.
Later.
All right.
Money or?
No, just seizing the opportunity.
Is that what you're calling it?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Maybe, we'll get that into the contract,
Let me show them how productive I can be. And have you noticed that when you pick up premium trips, or at least when you were at the airlines and you pick up a time and a half trip, that you're always flying plan and not full steam ahead? But when it's go home leg, it's full steam ahead. It's like, I picked up this trip on premium. Okay, how slow do you want me to fly? You want just be on time? I'm like, okay, not a minute early. Got it.
And then you're taxiing at a half mile an hour again.
Hey, that only happens at the best airlines. Safety first, my friend. Safety first. Well, in another pandemic milestone, the U.S. has ended its international travel ban, opening the door to vaccinated tourists. This from an article from CNBC by Leslie Josephs, dated November 8th, 2021. In the article, the key points are that the old rules that barred international visitors from 33 countries, including the UK, South Africa, Brazil, and much of Europe, has ended. Airlines, hotels, and others stand to benefit from the end of the restrictions, and visitors will have to show just a proof of vaccination to enter the U.S., along with a recent negative COVID-19 test. And this has really been one of the top stories with aviation, is getting this international travel back. That's going to take pilots that have been sitting at home collecting their minimum monthly guarantee, not really flying much because they're wide body pilots and those aircraft are primarily used for international travel. Well, now they're going to start to see an uptick in their schedules and flying. The United States on Monday ended a pandemic travel ban that was in place for more than a year and a half. A relief from the tourist industry and for families that have been separated by the rules since the crisis began. At New York's JFK International Airport, passengers who arrived from London on British Airways Flight 1 were greeted by applause from airline employees and balloons. Some business travelers said that they are ready to ditch the video calls for an in-person meeting at work. We've been desperate for 2 years to get out and see our staff, said Giles English, co-founder of luxury watchmaker Vermont, which has a store in Midtown Manhattan. English told CNBC shortly after arriving at JFK on British Airways Flight 1 that video technology is amazing, but I think face-to-face is so important. Another passenger, Catherine Donnelly, 52 of London, who flew in on that flight, said she hadn't been in New York for more than 2 years and that she was eager to visit her aunt who had been ill. The ban put in place by then President Donald Trump in early 2020 and later expanded by President Joe Biden earlier this year, prohibits visitors from 33 countries, including the UK, much of Europe, China, Brazil, and South Africa. So this is going to really open up a lot of this international flying. And Roger, even for you, if your aircraft owners decide, well, here we are. I mean, you just came back from Italy, and that was a fantastic international trip that you had conducted. But wasn't the travel ban going on back then too? How did you get around that?
So well, this is something that international travelers are going to be very happy about, and that's I can say that with I guess firsthand knowledge of the situation, because what actually the ban was it was a U.S. ban to international travelers. And so it wasn't a reciprocal thing, because we were able to go over to most of Europe. Like I spent that trip that you were talking about, that we stayed in Ireland, we stayed in Croatia, and we stayed in Italy, and then did a stop through Ireland again, but didn't stay. And so each one of those countries, for 2 weeks before we left, I was checking all the time about whether their specific requirements were going to change, and all of them allowed U.S. travelers to enter into their countries. But the vice versa was not true. And so while we could go over to these countries and visit, those same countries could not come over and visit the U.S. And there was, I wouldn't say there was anger about it, but there was definitely frustration from people from those countries that, well, that's great that you're here. We have no problem with you being here. And like I said, there was no anger, but we weren't, they weren't upset with us. But like, why is it that we are not allowed back in your country? And what our group would tell them is like, we don't know, we don't understand. Yeah. And fortunately, this is what's going to basically level the playing field. And it was, I thought it was a pretty cool video. It was just yesterday that this took effect, and there was a couple of British Airways. I think they're both 350s, Airbuses, that took off simultaneously from Heathrow on their way to JFK. And so there's this parallel takeoff of these two planes that are taking off in tandem, both of them on their way celebrate the fact that we were indeed opening or ending that travel restriction again.
Yeah. And the holidays in New York are fantastic. So come on over, everyone. This is a fantastic time of year to come. And I'm excited that finally, I mean, we originally at the beginning of this whole pandemic, we were talking about this, this COVID-19 thing. This is going to only last a few months. And because that was the formula from everything that happened before. Zika virus. Oh, what happened? When you heard about it for about 2 months, everything kind of got, everybody needs a vaccine or whatever, or a shot. And okay. And then you never heard about Zika virus anymore. Before that, it was like the swine flu. And before that, it was foot and mouth with a cow disease. I mean, and everything would always last around 2 or 3 months. It would be the headline of every news article. And then it would slowly kind of just fade away. And then, the risk has gone away. And we actually thought this was going to be something like that in aviation, we have to like shut it down for a few months and then we'll slowly start bringing it back. Even 9/11, though that hit the industry extremely hard for a long time because the rollback was very, very slow because of this fear that the public had to go flying. We had no idea that this was how the pandemic was going to turn out. And here we are. A year and a half later, we've been very fortunate to have this financial government relief that the companies were able to take advantage of and keep the staff on with the company, with the few exception of flight attendants that were furloughed, but then they're still getting paid to stay home because the needs of the company weren't there. So they had to get paid. They weren't technically on furlough, but they were at home collecting some kind of stipend to come back as soon as the company was ready for them. And now it's like the play has been started and get everybody back now because this international travel is definitely going to play a major factor in how many flights we have available, how full they're going to be. And yeah, I'm actually looking forward to seeing more international flying come into the U.S. and to see growth in our schedules.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the demand for transoceanic travel rebounds. I'm sure that initially we'll probably, especially like you had just kind of mentioned this time of year, I think that there's an uptick in travel overall. But especially, what it's going to look like from coming really east to west, because that has been shut down to them for a really long time. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And like you had mentioned, obviously that's going to have it could have a fairly substantial impact on the legacy carriers, especially United. I know had a I think probably the biggest proportion of their international revenue coming from this stuff, in which case it shrank by huge amounts. But
yeah, as long as everyone behaves.
Well, yeah, and that's a totally different discussion entirely.
Yeah, no, we're all looking forward to seeing what this means for our aviation careers, to see the opportunities, as we mentioned in the very last episode with Colonel Schooler. Terry was talking about all these opportunities for veterans to get into airline positions and how they're hiring, and I have a feeling that there's going to be a flood coming into the marketplace of opportunity for jobs for airlines, not just airlines, but for really every facet of the industry that they're going to be hiring. So yeah, I think by New Year's, we're going to start to see the effects of this international travel ban being lifted.
Yeah, I mean, from a staffing standpoint, I don't think that, for the U.S. companies, they were hiring before all the airlines, and this will only, possibly accelerate it. And I guess somewhat talking about what you guys were mentioning before about how do we write the schedules, because obviously you start putting more flights in internationally. If that does happen, then, if you don't have the staffing before, how are you going to add more flights?
Right.
And I don't know. I'm not an airline CEO, but there's definitely going to be some challenges with all the pros. There is going to come some of the cons, and hopefully those things will all get worked through. And there's a lot of, even outside of, obviously we talk about aviation primarily on this podcast. I mean, but you even see that across the entire world right now with supply chains and staffing and everybody hiring and not being able to find workers.
Yeah. So just let's hope that this really is the beginning of a return to normalcy. And I think the whole pandemic thing is I hate to say it because we've said it so many times, but I think it's winding down, man. I think we're starting to see that with the new protocols in place and the vaccination rates and people wearing masks and not wearing masks and all that stuff, the phobia of it all, I think, is slowly starting to deteriorate. And that's, I think, good to make wise decisions and, make smart decisions for your family and live a normal life.
I hope that we can get through the winter. I'm a little bit concerned about the winter with the colder weather. Because obviously the colder weather, there's an uptick just in general with illness, with airborne illnesses and people being in more confined places, I guess. And hopefully, I think that if we can get to the other side of winter, then I will feel even better about this winding down.
Well, just protect yourself against the White Walkers, because winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
Well, speaking of White Walkers and winter is coming, recently I discovered I was flying with a captain who said, "Hey, have you seen this movie or read this book?" And I thought, no. He was like, "Oh, you have to read the book. And if you can't, it's free on YouTube. You can watch the entire movie on YouTube." And I thought, really? You don't have to pay? It's not like a subscription thing, or you have to have YouTube channel that you have to pay for? He's like, no. He's like, it's totally free. There's a lot of aviation films, old black and white aviation films, absolutely free on YouTube. You might have to watch them in parts. They might be split up, but I had no idea. And one day I was kind of bored and I pulled out my tablet and I went to YouTube and I keyed in Fate is the Hunter, a 1964 film. And it came up and I watched it. It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I love old movies. I mean, I have a passion for film to begin with, but to watch this old black and white film, it's about an airplane that crashes on takeoff or slightly after takeoff and causes the death of 53 people. But who is to blame? It's the job of Sam Bain, played by Glenn Ford, to find out, especially since the pilot was his good friend. The authorities believe that he may have been drunk during the flight, those damn pilots. Knowing of the pilot's exemplary World War II record, Sam goes on to search for the true culprit with the aid of the lone survivor, stewardess Martha Weber, played by Suzanne Pleshette. And they actually reenact the events of the accident in the film. And that is really the only way they discovered what really happened. The film is great. It's a little cheesy in parts because, of course, in a modern age of film, we expect, the kind of a more robust plot line and not so many one-liners, but the film was fantastic. And I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I want to at least play parts of the trailer.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Captain Savage and the crew, I'd like to welcome you aboard Consolidated Flight 22.
Captain Savage.
Our flying time to Seattle will be 2 hours and 10 minutes at an altitude of 29,000 feet.
Expect the unexpected. You're taking off on a flight you'll remember as long as you live. Here is the inside story of an airline pilot in this jet age, and the men and women behind the scenes who literally hold your fate in their hands. Glenn Ford, who fought to prove his friend a hero when his critics called him a heel. Nancy Kwan, the beautiful Chinese girl who changed the pilot's life and her own. Rod Taylor, who held the key to all their lives. Suzanne Plachette, how much did love play in her decision? Wally Cox, who owed him more than he could tell. And Jane Russell, who started a private war of her own. Their intimate lives, their many loves, their secret passions are revealed in the greatest suspense picture of this jet age.
Let's face it, Sam, Jack wasn't the so-called ideal image to begin with.
No, what do you mean by that?
Well, a bachelor like that?
Well, it just so happens that I am a bachelor, too.
You are not a line pilot. From all I know, last year, you didn't bounce from a stripper to an heiress to I don't know what else.
Yeah, not quite politically correct in this day and age, but you know what? Most old films were not. But, you know, it's not offensive, I didn't think in any way. It was a really fantastic film and really interesting. They did a great job. It had that whole like black and white Alfred Hitchcock kind of feel, and the music, you know, that swells throughout all the passionate scenes where they're looking longingly in each other's eyes, and that really good-looking Chinese girl. I kept saying that in the preview and throughout the film.
You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I guess, in a way, of the whole Sully thing, except this was, you know, obviously fictionalized, but we had this accident, and then they go back, and it's we're trying to recreate it. It's best, like, what exactly happened, and what could we have done better? You know, just like a real life thing where we had something that happened, and then they go back, in this case, into the simulators. Okay, let's try and recreate exactly what happened, and what could we have done better? It's kind of, to me, striking, a little eerily striking on the similarities on how we went back and had this one thing happen, and then we go back and we try to recreate exactly what happened, kind of trying to, you know, almost Monday morning quarterbacking. Well, what could we have done better?
Yeah, all the armchair experts
a lot of these
sit
things
there.
that happened, like, these are not things that are going to happen again. I mean, what are we going to take from this, or what are we going to take from Sully? Is like, what are the chances of that happening in the same spot again? Are like none.
Yeah, but you know, changes, and if you watch the film, the last 5 minutes are fantastic because changes to the industry come written in blood, and that's what this film really does a fantastic job depicting, is how when an accident happens in real life, what is the process to eliminate the cause to something that can be prevented from happening again? Was it some pilot that was hot dogging it or drunk, or you know, or was it truly a mechanical failure or a procedural issue that caused the incident or accident? And this film in 1964 hit the nail on the head. And of course, it's an adaptation from a book. Actually, let me find out.
Should we stop serving pilots coffee on the flight deck?
So you've seen it. Yes. They need to be in a sippy cup. According to what happened over in, what was it, England? Was it British Airways, that the Airbus, they can no longer have liquids? Remember when that happened? And the Air 330 or A350 airplane was modified. The start-stop selector switches.
Oh, I did not hear about that.
Oh, no?
No.
Let's see here. First, let me find. Well, this film is an adaptation from the book Fate is a Hunter. It's a 1961 memoir by aviation writer Ernest K. Gann. It describes his years working as a pilot from 1930 to 1950, starting at American Airlines in Douglas DC-2s and Douglas DC-3s, when civilian air transport was in its infancy, moving on to wartime flying in C-54s, C-87s, and Lockheed Lodestars. And finally, at Matson Navigation's short-lived upstart airline and various post-World War II non-scheduled airlines in a Douglas DC-4. Fate is the Hunter, first edition, published date 1961. So, you know, if you're into reading the novel or the book, I would definitely pick that up on Amazon. Great read, especially if you're a commuter. Why don't you throw that in your flight bag there? And then there is, of course, this black and white film, Hollywood film. Now, this film, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but we kind of alluded to
Maybe we shouldn't serve pilots coffee on the flight deck anymore.
Blasphemy, I say. But then again, does life imitate art, or is it the other way around? You say that, but recently, not long ago, back in September of 2020, we were talking about how the Airbus has to spill-proof the A350 because coffee spilled in the cockpit and shut down both engines in flight. And this is something that happened over at British Airways. And I remember reading this, and they were talking about, well, the coffee is kind of a must. Let's just give the pilots sippy cups. So what ended up happening was a pilot set down his cup of coffee on the center pedestal. Big no-no, by the way. It's dubbed the liquid-free zone for a reason. We do our best never to...
But it happens.
Somebody knocked it over, and it actually seeped into the area where the start-stop selectors for the engines are, and it shorted out really both switches, making the A350 engines shut down in flight. There's a whole article about this. I'll just put a link in the show notes. But yeah, coincidence? Interesting.
It's kind of funny all the things that people don't know about, like the stupid stuff like coffee or water. I mean, obviously coffee with a bigger, in a styrofoam cup or something, and how much havoc these things can wreak.
Yeah. I've been saying that I need to, and I just need to shut up and do it. I need to develop, engineer, and patent a spill-proof coffee cup that actually fits in a frickin' Airbus coffee cup holder, because those things are designed for European size, I guess, coffee cups that are on the back of the airplane, which are tiny, and you're
so you're having to find somewhere else to put them down.
Yeah, exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, sippy cups for coffee. I'm telling you, it's the way to go.
Be a man or be a woman. Who needs coffee?
Speak for yourself, Roger. Well, that concludes our flight today. As our flight is drawing to an end, we would like to thank all of you for coming along on this journey with us. A very special thank you to Captain Roger and Rob D for joining us today. Please help us out by sharing this podcast online and with your friends. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Squawk Ident Podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can send us an email or even audio feedback via our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you'll find audio archives, photos from the flight line, a guest book photo tab, and our Squawk Ident pilot shop, where you can find an assortment of t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Small proceeds from every sale goes towards helping to finance this podcast. You can also contribute to Squawk Ident financially right there from the homepage. Every dollar helps. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident Podcast or at Squawk Ident Podcast. Also, a big final thank you to Rob D and Captain Roger for joining me today. And thank you to you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Have a good one, everyone.
Fly safe, take care.